Hello, I'm William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and today is Sunday, August 13th. As we get ready for a new school year, I'd like to take a little bit of time and share thoughts about the Classical Liberal Arts College that we've talked about through the years, because it's obvious for students who are making their way through studies in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy that as they move up through their studies and come to the end of their high school years, or as they're interested in studying as adults, because our program is really the only program that can justly call itself a program that makes lifelong learning available. Questions arise about what's next. What do we do next? What can we do next? What do students do as adults when they've been working in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy? And this sort of glaring, obvious next step for what needs to be done is the development of a college. The problem with that is that when we use the word college today, just like we had to deal with when we started the academy, when people think about schooling, they immediately think of a K-12 school, and we spent 15 years explaining to people why there's no need for K-12 studies, which was recently confirmed by our approval for candidacy for accreditation. It took us a long time to convince families that you don't need to have a K-12 model in order to have a high school diploma or qualify for college admission or for the school to be accredited at that. So when it comes to college, we're going to have the same sort of challenge. We've got to deal with what a college actually is supposed to be as opposed to what modern colleges have become, because what modern colleges are doesn't even make any sense anymore. And they really don't serve any purpose. They're not helpful to students who are interested in classical Catholic studies. And we're sort of back to the drawing board. Just what we've done for the academy is going to need to be done eventually for a college program. And so we're going to have to work out this whole idea of what it means for a college to be a college and what it doesn't mean to be a college. And we're going to have to do the work of developing a real classical Catholic college. And I'd like to talk about what my vision is for that and explain how we're going to get this ball rolling this upcoming year. First of all, what a college is, if you simply look up the word college in a dictionary, you'll find that a college is an association or society of people that are collaborating on a certain project. It just means a group, a society, an association, and so on. So we refer, for example, to the College of the Apostles, meaning the group of men who were called apostles. They're referred to as a college. The College of the Bishops or the College of Cardinals in the church. It just means a collection. That's what the word college actually means. So it's a collection of people who are gathered together for a certain function or a certain goal or end that they pursue together. That's what a college really is. And so what a college is supposed to be is a group of people that come together to collaborate in working towards a certain end. Now, in a modern college, that end is relatively shallow. It's become very shallow. The end to which students are working is the attainment of a degree. So whether you go to, Harvard College or whether you're at a local community college, there's some diploma or certificate or degree that's like the carrot in front of the horse that students are chasing. And so they are truly colleges, but the end that they seek is very shallow and short-sighted. And the question arises, if we were to pursue real classical Catholic studies, not just as kids in school, but for lifelong studies in the pursuit of wisdom, And there was an association of men and women and children gathered together for that purpose. There would be a college. A college would already exist. The college being the association of those scholars, we might call them, who are studying the classical Catholic curriculum, working together in pursuit of some end, which wouldn't necessarily be a diploma or a certificate or a degree, but wisdom itself. It would be a college of men, women, and children, a college of students working together in pursuit of wisdom. And in the classical liberal arts college, we would have the classical liberal arts curriculum, scholastic philosophy, Catholic theology, the humanities as the focus of our collected studies, and that would be the culture of the college. Now, as I said, if there is an association of men and women and younger students engaged in these studies, we already have a college. A college already exists. But we can formalize that association. We can formalize that college. We can give it some order, some clearer function, what one of my old professors used to refer to as mechanical solidarity. You know, there already is an organic solidarity. There already is solidarity among these students working together in pursuit of a knowledge of the classical Catholic curriculum, but we can give some mechanical solidarity to that, some artificial solidarity, some formal solidarity. And that's what we would be talking about when we actually talk about forming classical liberal arts college. We would be formalizing something that already exists, and we're simply recognizing its existence and making it more explicit, giving it some visibility and some order, and so on. So there is no question about whether we're going to develop a college, a classical liberal arts college. We already have one. It's developing more and more, especially recently as we're getting more adult students who just in their own leisure as adults are studying the classical Catholic curriculum. So this college is already developing. It already exists, and it's real. In fact, I would argue that it's even more real, organically speaking, than modern colleges, which have an impressive mechanical solidarity. They have an appearance, and they have this sort of visible presence. But when you poke through that diploma or that degree and ask, what's really bringing all of these students and professors together, you find that there's really not much. It's really quite a mercenary relationship that exists between them. And as soon as the kids get their degrees, they bounce and they're off and they don't look back. It really isn't much of a college. It's just a business. These kids are buying degrees. There are some requirements that they've got to work through to get the degree, and then that's it. That relationship ends with the reception of the degree. That's really not what a college is. It's a very short-sighted, temporary idea of a college. And the vision that I have for a college is much broader, much more enduring than that, and I would say much more real, because it actually is a college of men, women, and children pursuing something that we're supposed to be pursuing, not just until we get some paperwork, but for our entire lives. That's really what it's for. And formalizing the collaboration among all of the students and tutors that arise out of the student body naturally based on their own merits, not based on some artificial hiring process. That's what really is going to develop this college, and it's already developing. It already exists, and over time, we're going to formalize it. Now, some may say, well, what can this college actually do? And if you come with that question asking about degrees or about career plan, it just makes no sense. There are already colleges that exist to give you a bachelor's degree that allows you to go get a job. So you don't need us to do that. We don't need to do that. If my kids say, Dad, I want a degree because I want to become a lawyer or I want to become a teacher, I would say, well, go to the local state university. That's the best place to get a teaching degree. That's the best place to get a professional degree. If you wanted to work in politics, I would say, well, then you should probably try to get into an Ivy League school or a school that's got a significant, political history with lots of political connections. That's how you choose a professional school. This isn't a professional school. This isn't an intermediary step. This is more of a final destination. So it's very different. Now, the state of North Carolina would allow us to offer a degree for members of our college. We could establish a formal study program, and we've already done this actually, and the state of North Carolina allows us to formally identify as Classical Liberal Arts College and offer a degree in Classical Christian Studies. So we could offer a bachelor degree in Classical Christian Studies. We've already been approved for that. But it would be an unaccredited degree, an unaccredited degree, just like the Classical Liberal Arts Academy has operated for the past 15 years as an unaccredited school. Now, the problem is that accreditation is really not necessary. It's a complicated issue that I know that most American people are not going to have the guts to think about realistically. One thing I learned when I was in college, because I had to figure out how to pay for college myself, get through college myself. In God's providence, I was made to go through college as a beggar, as it were. I had to rely on personal relationships. I had to ask favors. I had to ask for opportunities to do things that weren't in the policy manual. And what I almost always found was when a person is successful in the real work, all of the artificial policy stuff is set aside as secondary. What I mean by that is the admissions policies of colleges assumes that students are all coming from modern schools. It assumes they've had a certain arrangement to their studies. It's assumed that they've had certain opportunities, and so they create general policies that serve those circumstances. But when an individual comes along who's different, who goes above and beyond those policies, who doesn't have the same background that's assumed or expected in applicants, they receive those applications and they're willing to accept those students. Most people don't understand that because they look at the policy manual and they imagine that if you don't fit what the policy manual says, you can't possibly be admitted. But that's not true, because that policy manual is a general policy manual. Ultimately, decisions about admission and promotion and all these different ideas in professional life and higher learning, etc., they ultimately come down to personal relationships, and there are individual men and women who make these decisions, and they have some freedom. They've got freedom to admit someone to a program that doesn't fit the expected persona of an applicant. They have freedom to do that. That's why we can have kids go to college who are only 12 and 13 years old. They don't fit the policy manual because they exceed the expectations of the policy manual. And so when an organization, or when individuals, I should say, when individuals are raised up that exceed the expectations, they may not have the requirements that are listed as necessary by the general policy manual, But that's only because the policy manual is written based on the normal expectations. So when a student is raised up who exceeds those expectations, he doesn't necessarily have to follow the policy manual. That school is looking for the best students. It's used to having students apply who come from low standard modern schools. When a student applies from a high standard organization or even private studies, that's what they're looking for. If an organization can produce extraordinary students who exceed the normal expectations, they're going to be admitted into top programs because that's what those programs are looking for. And so when we talk about accreditation and academy stuff and college admission or professional studies pursued elsewhere, a lot of these general policy requirements are going to be found to not apply to our students because we're doing things that these next step institutions don't expect students to be doing. And ultimately, their acceptance of our students is what causes our institution to become prestigious. It's based on the success of our students, not on whether we have the accreditation or the certification or this or that, or it's judged by the fruits. And so there are two ways to run an institution or develop an institution. You can create this big, modern, shallow diploma mill, which is what most schools are, and the standards just get lower and lower and they keep issuing. It's like inflation with money. You know, the diploma becomes less and less valuable, and everyone knows that. So you can start a school, you can call it classical school, but it's just a diploma mill. Everyone knows that. It serves low standards. It doesn't do anything that would be considered, academic in any historical sense. It's just a program that leads kids through the minimum standards and gets them the piece of paper at the end. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that a high school diploma is relatively useless. It's just a minimal requirement for admission. But when an organization like the Classical Liberal Arts Academy comes along that says, no, we're not existing just to produce a diploma. We're actually concerned with real learning, real classical liberal arts study, real philosophy studies, real humanities studies, classical languages, reasoning and rhetoric, and so on. We're producing students that these schools don't even expect to exist. And so over time, and again, it's very difficult because Catholic families are too insecure and they're not willing to identify in this way. They think that they've got to be like everyone else, and they judge success as whether they, in the end, look like everyone else, which actually causes them to not be successful. But it's almost impossible to communicate that to modern Catholic families. Whereas the universities are making it as clear as possible that they're diverse and they're seeking diversity and they're looking for extraordinary students, but the Catholics are so ashamed of Catholicism that they're afraid to appear extraordinary. They actually are trying to conform and make themselves look like everyone else. That's a character flaw among modern Catholics that I don't know if we're ever going to get over that. There's no way to help Catholics get over this barrier of being embarrassed of their religion and their culture. Muslims aren't like that. Hindus aren't like that. Buddhists aren't like that. Jews aren't like that. Christians are embarrassed of their culture. And when they're applying to universities and programs that are celebrating diversity, they actually put themselves at a disadvantage, make themselves vanilla, and get denied admission because they've actually caused themselves to lose what's attractive about them, which is their extraordinary Catholic culture. But I can't make people think like that. But over time, I think that our credibility will grow, especially now that we're being accredited by Cognia. We're going to continue to knock these barriers down, and eventually some Catholics are going to have the courage to just happily identify as a Catholic and not try to hide their light under a bushel basket, but let it shine. And when they do that, they'll be rewarded. And it'll take time for Catholics to, I don't know why, but it's going to take time for them to learn to do that. I've been trying to explain that for 15 years, but still, I have not been able to succeed in persuading students to be proud of their Catholic heritage. They just make themselves vanilla and are content to get in line behind public school kids and think that that's a sign of success. But my vision for the future is that eventually, at some point, Catholic students are going to become more courageous and proud of their heritage, maybe as our society gets worse. And we're going to be producing students and making students available to next-level institutions that are extraordinary. And they're going to begin admitting those students, contrary to what the policy manuals say or what the policy manuals say is necessary for admission, because we're going to exceed those expectations. And when our students start getting admitted directly into higher institutions, professional schools, seminaries, religious communities, and so on, our college program, our academy is not even going to need any accreditation, though we can pursue it and obtain it if we choose to. But I'm not concerned with that, and I think because there's really no quality candidates being produced by modern schools, I think we need to challenge the standards and just focus on becoming the best students, and then putting pressure on these institutions to admit the best students rather than play with this policy nonsense. And there are going to be schools who do that. If you talk to, let's say, Ivy League schools, and again, Catholics don't like to think like this, but if you talk to a cheesy local public university and say, what's required for admission, they'll start rattling off all the SAT requirements, GPA, class rank, all this jibber-jabber, all this low-level paperwork stuff. That's what the low-level colleges will do. If you talk to Harvard or Princeton or an elite university, they don't even talk about that stuff. They say, look, we have a whole person evaluation process. We look at a student based on his interests, based on opportunities that he's had, based on unique qualifications, skills, gifts, and talents, and so on. And we make a case-by-case admissions decision based on individuals. Well, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Modern Catholics are afraid of that because for all the talk, they really don't accomplish very much that distinguishes them. And they're always trying to be like everyone else, so they really have no personal interests to present and make themselves attractive in such an environment. But that's really how elite institutions work. They know to look beyond the paperwork. They know to look beyond all the superficial stuff. And, one day, like I said, I believe that Catholic students are going to have the guts to begin presenting themselves as such and actually doing stuff, not just talking about stuff while they really don't do anything. I believe that students will rise up who actually are willing to stand up tall and, take pride in their Catholic culture, take pride in their own God-given gifts and abilities and interests, vocations, and so on, and present themselves for admission based on their own merits, not based on all of this shallow paperwork nonsense. And when they do that, when they finally get the courage to do that, they'll be successful in gaining admission to higher institutions, to elite institutions, because that's what they're looking for. Now, where does that courage come from? That's the other issue. The courage, because I talked to one of my kids about this recently because he was in a public speaking course, and he was talking about how he prepared and all this kind of stuff, but he was nervous when he finally had to go up and speak. And I said, the reason why you're nervous is because you know that you don't know what you're talking about. That's what makes you nervous when you talk to people. If you know that you haven't prepared and you haven't studied rightly and you haven't worked through the material for mastery, you know you really don't know it very well, and you think there might be someone out in that audience who knows it better than you do. That's what causes you to not have courage when you talk to an audience. You know that you haven't prepared well, or you haven't studied for mastery. You know you're not an expert on the subject. So where is that courage going to come from to do the things that I've talked about here? And that courage is going to come when students know that they've prepared masterfully. When they know that they are the experts, that's when they're going to have the courage to stand up and say, look, I know that there's no one else doing what I've done. There's no one else studying what I've studied. It's not that I've studied this textbook or that textbook or watched this video. I'm studying the original texts themselves. I'm learning the classical languages. I'm studying Aristotle. I'm studying the scriptures. I'm studying Thomas Aquinas. I know that I'm studying the master texts, and I know that I know them because I can explain them. And that's where that courage will come from. And it's just not going to be developed until Catholics break free from all of this anxiety about worldly requirements, modern requirements that are actually lower standards, that they actually work harder to achieve lower standards so they can have all their paperwork in order, so they can look like everybody else. They work harder and spend more to become lower. And that's a phenomenon that I can't understand. I tend to think the opposite way in life, but that's how modern Catholic families think. But eventually we're going to have students who work diligently, study the master texts, move through the curriculum, and they're going to know that they know. And they're going to be able to stand confidently, present themselves confidently, and they're going to shock those admissions representatives. That's when the academy or the college, in my personal judgment, will fulfill its mission. We're nowhere even close. But as for this college, the same thing is true. We think, well, maybe students would want to get a bachelor degree and move on to a graduate school. Well, the graduate schools are designed to admit students from accredited colleges and universities. So that same obstacle is going to be there. You're going to have to actually be better. You're going to have to actually be extraordinary, not just think you're extraordinary. You're going to have to objectively, really do more than others. And if you do more than others, you will be admitted, because they're not going to stick to their general policies when they've got a candidate in front of them, the likes of which they've never seen before. That's what they're really dreaming for. But until those students present themselves, we're just going to have general policies applied. And it's going to take someone with the courage and with the skill and commitment to real learning to be willing to challenge those admission standards and open a way for students to come directly from classical Catholic studies, bypassing this whole Wizard of Oz system of modern colleges and universities, and go directly into the next level institutions. That's going to come in time, but that community has to be established first that actually produces that kind of a scholar. And that's where the college comes in. It doesn't need to have a degree program. It doesn't need to formalize. It needs to start putting up results. It needs to actually be developing an intellectual culture that's superior to what exists in modern schools and colleges. It needs to actually be better. And that's going to be my focus. I'm not going to talk about cheesy degrees or certifications for people who don't actually do anything better. And so what we're going to do is we're going to begin, because parents ask me about the college plans and if we're going to offer a college degree and this kind of stuff. And I'm going to say this. When students start achieving extraordinary things, we'll stick a degree on top of those extraordinary things. But until then, we're not going to become another institution that dishes out these meaningless, inflated diplomas that don't move the needle in learning or education. So when students start doing extraordinary work, we'll prepare to give them some kind of degree that represents our college as something different and extraordinary and superior. But until then, I'm not going to talk about any degrees or certificates because I'm not interested in running a diploma mill. We already have thousands of them everywhere. What I'm going to do is begin organizing the college. And the first place the college is going to organize, I'm going to set this up today, is I'm going to set up a forum dedicated to the college. It's going to be the College Forum. It's going to be a place where students of all ages discuss their studies in the classical Catholic curriculum. And you'll be able to look at this forum and look at the discussions and see whether anything extraordinary is actually being done or not. And if not, then, like I said, there's nothing to talk about because we're not doing anything extraordinary. But if this forum begins to buzz and begins to become a place where students of all ages discuss the classical liberal arts, scholastic philosophy, Catholic theology, the humanities, and so on, then you're going to see whether a college is actually developing or not. I think that it will. I think it's going to take a long time for the reasons I talked about before. I think Catholics are too timid in modern society. They're intimidated by modern society. For all the talk, for all of the self-congratulating, modern Catholics are terrified of the world. That's why Catholic schools are the way they are. That's why Catholic colleges and universities are the way they are. That's why religious communities are trying to, promote themselves by showing monks and nuns playing frisbee, trying to look like, secular. Or we're embarrassed of real Catholic culture. We're embarrassed of philosophy. We're embarrassed of our Catholic heritage, and that's why we really don't do anything. We have nothing significant to offer. If we see this forum begin to buzz with intellectual activity, students discussing things, working together, collaborating, we're going to see the existence of a real classical Catholic college, an association of students and tutors working to master the classical Catholic curriculum. That's what a college really is. So we'll see if there really is a college. And then if a college does in fact develop, we'll formalize it. We'll add some, like I said, mechanical solidarity to that organic college that already exists. And we should be able to make some noise if such a program does in fact exist. That's for students to decide. I'm certain that I'll be there. I can think of a few people that I know who will be there to develop this. But for numbers to become significant, to actually refer to it as a college, that's going to depend on the results. And I'm not going to listen to talk. I'm going to look at the results because it's about facta non verba. It's about deeds, not words. If we're not actually doing things that are superior, then we have nothing to talk about. We don't need another diploma mill college around. But if we actually are doing something different, if we actually are doing what we say we're doing, and we actually can point to a place in these forums where you can see a real college developing and interacting and collaborating, well, then we'll have the real thing. And I think if we have the real thing, all of these policies and restrictions and obstacles will be proven to just be ghosts, and we'll move right past them. So I'm going to set up what's going to be called the Classical Liberal Arts College Forum as a place for students to commit to lifelong learning in classical Catholic studies. And if such a community develops, then we'll formalize it. And if such a community does not develop, then there's nothing to talk about. So that's the plan for Classical Liberal Arts College. God bless.